Hey everybody, Mark with Cardivox Academy here, and today, well, this is video 2 of 3 of our triple triad, 3 video in 1 day special. Now, I know in the last video I accidentally said Sunday versus Saturday. It's been crazy down here. I can barely keep track of which day it is. But to celebrate 10,000 subscribers, I had the idea of doing an Ask Me Anything, an AMA video, and I got a lot of questions. A couple things about the questions. If I got a lot of the same question multiple times, I kind of just compiled it into the one that was, the most thorough. So I'm not answering the same question over and over again, just to kind of save you all some time. Secondly, I'm going to try to be as concise as possible because we've got about 40 questions here. And so let's cut straight to it. But first, cheers. Question number 1. All right, so Connor Burns, and bear with me, the text is kind of small here. Connor Burns says, my question for you as far as lyricism, how do you structure your writing process, and how does your band specifically go about the writing process? Great question. So it's changed a lot as our members in Kardashev have changed a lot. But primarily, Nico will write the majority of the composition at this point. He has the whole setup at his place, and so, he'll just kind of jam out by himself, unfortunately. And then I'll show up usually after the main composition is pretty much done, and then I'll give him my feedback. And usually, since he's the guitarist, pretty much what he says goes. I just kind of throw my 2 cents in there. I come up with some of the melodies, like in Beside Cliffs and Chasms in our last release. There's an ambient section where a lead, da 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 da. I came up with that, but he came up with 99% of everything else. And then as far as lyric writing, I pace around the room while he plays it, and then I come up with patterns, and then I go home, close myself in my office like a hermit, and pound some lyrics out. And it takes a while. Lyrics are pretty tough, actually, because I really want them to be not terrible, and I'm my own harshest critic. So that's that's the basic way it goes now. Next question. Will you be my best friend, Russell2937? Bro, we're already besties. Like, come on. Much love. Christopher Place, I don't know how to say it. He's got 2 questions. Let's talk about it. Ooh, what class do you play in D&D? So, I don't play any classes in D&D. I'm the DM. Actually, I recently got into D&D. I had tried it back in college briefly. Didn't really go well. But we recently got into it. We've been running a campaign since June of this year. We only get to play once a month. But I think if I could play in a D&D campaign, I would probably go Cleric or Paladin. Just because I like the idea of being able to smash with a melee weapon and also do some magic as well. So I think that'd be pretty cool. Maybe Monk, but I don't know. Yeah, Cleric or Paladin. Question number 2, top 5 metal any genre bands currently. Well, I'm going to approach this not from top 5 because that's kind of subjective, but bands that I really enjoy personally. Let's think about it. So I think right now, I've always liked Rivers of Nile or Nil. I have heard many people say it different ways. Really like them. Sand Baptism is probably my favorite song. They're not super metal, but Alcest has a lot of metal influence, and I think that they're one of the best out there. Viltjarta is one of my top 5 favorite metal bands of all time. Then, of course, let's see. Bands that I love their music all the way through. Oh, Lengsel. If anybody out there knows the band Extol, a lot of their members were originally in a band called Lengsel. That was really good. And then Lantloss. I think Lantloss is one of my favorite bands that's ever been created. So was that 5? I think so. Was it 5? Maybe. Lantloss, Lengsel, Alcest, Rivers of Nile, and then no, that was only 4. A 5th one. Let's see. Cattle Decapitation is really good. I like them quite a bit. Yeah. So, there's my answer to that. Next question. Frederick. Could you please talk about distortion placement? You said it sometimes, but I don't know how to do it. Also, how to get lower with my screams would be cool. Okay. Yes. Let's keep it very brief because it's not something you could really talk about in just like 1 minute. But distortion placement is the concept of rather than feeling all the grit down here when you start with like Cookie Monster vocals, where most people start, choosing to move that distortion higher up. The easiest way to get started doing it is to practice with tighter, smaller vowel shapes. So a lot of people, when they scream, they just say, and that can be a good way to start if you have a coach there with you, walking you through it, making sure you're not doing it wrong. But if you start with an you can kind of feel that bubbly, gritty sensation up top. And as far as lows lower, my tip to you would be to stop thinking about your lows going lower and start thinking about your lows resonating more. So opening up your mouth, lowering your jaw, lengthening your vocal tract by tightening your lips and moving them forward. That's going to help you get your lows lower without you shoving your larynx down your throat and sounding like Patrick. Next. Sheehan666. Congratulations, you deserve it. Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. What's your playlist look like? Let's talk about that. So, on Spotify, if you look up my band, Kardashev, and scroll down all the way, there is a playlist I made just for this reason, because people were asking about it. It's called Mark's Favorites. How creative. And if you click it, it's got a ton of songs on there that I absolutely love. For example, it starts off with one of my absolute favorites. That's a song by a band called Waruna, called Pertho, for anyone who's interested. But there's a lot more than just, your kind of Viking-y, Norse-sounding stuff. So check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. Second part, who's my favorite vocalist? So I don't have a favorite vocalist per se, but I think Johnny Davey from Job for a Cowboy is really good, and I'm surprised people don't talk about him as much. He's utterly fantastic. Dickie Allen, of course, Infinite Annihilator, really good. Travis Ryan. But I think if I only had one vocalist I could listen to, like, for the rest of my life who did screams, it would be Nej from Alcest. Something about his screams, even though he's not all over the place, are just so honest and lovely that I just can't help it. And then the last part of this question, what's one thing you would like to learn? Musical or math, doesn't matter. I'd love to be better at math. I would love to become fluent in French. French is one of the most, in my opinion, beautiful languages that exists. And I think it's fantastic. So if I could just snap my fingers and be good at something, it'd probably be French. Next. Roktya has a question. I wanted to ask if you have any tips for finding your screaming voice. Yes, I do, actually. So, for coming from the perspective of false chord, a lot of people, they have one of two goals in mind, generally speaking. Doing like a really crazy high or doing like a really, really guttural low. I would say, first and foremost, find the path of least resistance. So if it's easier for you to be like, yeah, like that's really not a scream in and of itself, but if you can do, yeah, which is really close to just my normal talking voice, yeah, that's a good place to start. And then don't move past that until you can feel most of the grit off of your vocal folds and up a little higher in your throat. Hope that helps. Rick Ellis. Cheers to you. What are your thoughts on vocal effects and processors to make a voice sound more brutal? Do it. I'm serious. Do it. It depends. It's not whether or not you're using effects. It's whether or not you're claiming the effects are you. For example, in Kardashev, under my singing, I use a vocoder all the time. Not consistently throughout it, but like there are some sections, like in our song Beyond Sun and Moon, where like one of the voices is meant to represent like some alien thing, and so we wanted it to kind of sound unnatural, and so it just made sense to vocode it. And we've been doing that off and on in all of our music. Or at the end of Displacement, I shift my voice really low, so it sounds like an alien monster as well. Now, it's so dramatic that it's clear that that's not me. And I think that if you're doing it for artistic expression or to make a cool effect, like go for it. You don't have anybody to prove yourself to. If you're in music, let's face it, you're probably not going to be rich, so you might as well have fun. But don't claim that it's you. If anybody asks, hey, did you pitch shift those lows? Be like, yeah, we thought it'd be really cool to have an inhuman sound. So that's the thing. I guess my answer would be, it's not whether or not you use it, it's whether or not you hide behind it. What's the good lord, what's the best method, Native Ryan says, or technique for expanding vocal range? I'm currently peaking around an A3. Okay. With my cleans before I start to crack, and I'd like to go higher. Have I hit my ceiling, or do I need to work on anything in particular? Well, that's a good question. So a lot of the times when people talk about expanding their range, what they're really doing is just learning to use their natural range efficiently. They're actually using the full capacity of their instrument. They're not expanding past what they're capable. They're just growing and becoming comfortable in the voice that they have. I would say a really good place to start with that would be to, well, especially since you're trying to move higher, I would say if you, you mentioned A3, so you clearly have a keyboard or a guitar or something. Go a couple notes higher than that and practice singing in practice singing in a head voice. Now, obviously, you're not always going to want to be in the head voice, but sometimes if we correct something a lot, it'll be easier to come back. So find a note, put your hand on your chest up here, or put your hand on your chest and up here, sing a note. Maybe not that high, but you can also play around with other vowel shapes just when you're learning. Ooh is a really easy one for a lot of people. Ooh. So you can play around with that. Also, a lot of times when people are having trouble with high notes, it means there's tension here. Remember, our vocal folds have to elongate and tighten. And so if we have constriction in our throat that's fighting that, they're not going to be able to do their job. So those are just from reading, 2 things that I would suggest for you. Next question. Robbie P, would you be interested in doing a feature with an AZ local metal band? Yes, I used to do a lot more features. However, currently I'm way too busy to do any sort of guest spots or anything like that, unless what you're asking is to review on my channel an AZ local band, which I'm also having some trouble finding time to finding time for that. So depending on how you mean that, either way, the answer is yes, but I'm not sure when I would have the time to do it. But you should link your band. Let's check you out. Put it in the comments. So I'll have a listen. Oh, my guy. We've talked on email a little bit. Have you ever had vocal damage, especially when starting out? Yes. If so, how did you find the motivation to recover correctly and get back into vocals? This is an important story. Let's talk about it. So, when I first started doing metal vocals, I had enough of a background in singing in choirs and stuff to know better. But my 2 bandmates at the time, well, 3, because we had a drummer briefly in the beginning, they had all been in bands before, and Kardashev was my first band, and I really wanted to impress them, and I really wanted to be able to keep up. And I was a noob, and they were not. So I got in there, and rather than being honest about my abilities and taking it slow, I just went for it. I just pushed as hard as I could because I really wanted to be like a cool guy. And I strained my voice so bad, I couldn't scream for about a month. Now, this was less than a year in to the whole metal thing. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And that's part of the reason why I harp on safety so much, because I think that if you're going to do this, you really have to be careful. You really have to be careful with your voice. How did I find the motivation to get back into vocals? I just reminded myself that it was temporary. Yes, we should take vocal damage seriously. And yes, if we do hurt ourselves, we need to make permanent changes so that they're not continual, because those continual bad habits are where you get, permanent or close to permanent vocal damage. But I just chalked it up to a learning experience. I said, all right, Mark, your punishment is that you have to sit out for a month. No reason to beat yourself up on top of that. And, realize it's temporary, and that when you're back, now you know what not to do. So there's that. Alexander Hernandez. Any ideas on how to do the whistle screams? Straight up, no. I don't know. I've been looking into it and researching it, and I've read some things, but it's just eluding me. I would imagine. Now, this is all guesswork here, but I would imagine that there's vocal fold closure. I don't really think that you'd be able to get it from a false chord approach. Reason is because to get that kind of a whistle without your vocal folds being engaged, your airflow would have to be so tight. Like when you're walking down the street and you hear like wind whistling through a really narrow alleyway, your airflow would have to be so tight. I don't know if a human can make it that tight. So that makes me think, well, there's vocal fold closure. And that's when we get into fry screaming territory, which is not my ball game. But I would say research whistle register. That's a thing. Mariah Carey, when she hits those really high notes, whistle register. Research that. And I would not attempt it unless you had a vocal coach who could sing in the whistle register themselves. Don't try to learn something from a vocal coach if they can't do it. Make sure they can do it first, and then have them. I just feel like that would be if you go straight towards those whistle screams or the whistle register, you could really pull something a little too hard. So I would suggest finding a coach that can help you do that. Next question. Elijah, how did I get into screaming and vocals? Keep up the good work. Thank you for the motivation. I appreciate that. I got into it because Nico, the guitarist in Kardashev, he and I were both going to NAU, Northern Arizona University, and we were playing Magic the Gathering together at the time, and he was like, "Hey man, you like metal?" And I was like, duh. And he recorded me in his dorm room, and those vocals were hot garbage. My lows, I can't do them anymore because I've been doing them right for a while, but my lows were kind of like, right about here. That's about what my lows were. That's where I started. In fact, I've been trying to dig up some of those old tracks just to show people how how much of a rough start I had. But yeah, that's how it started. Just jamming around with Nico, having a good time. Andrew, 123. What was your first profound moment when you realized metal vocals was something you want to do? Great question. So, I think for me, it was... Well, I'm assuming that when you say wanted to do, you're talking about less like a hobby and more like pursuing it as like a serious, like at least supplemental career. That's how I'm reading the question. And I think for me, it was after playing a show. I can't remember which show it was, but I was on stage and I had gotten to the point where my vocals were very comfortable. I didn't really have to think about it anymore. I just kind of did them. And I like straight up went into like this trance state. Like I stepped on the stage, I started screaming for the next 30 to 40 minutes. Everything was just like light and sound and color and emotion. And it was like pure euphoria. It was like, honestly, like the biggest high I've ever had. Just from that, just from screaming and performing. And when I came out from that, and I just saw like the crowd of, I don't know, 15 people looking at me and like really into what I had been doing and the rest of the band had been doing, I was just like, yep, this is what it's going to be. And I've kind of been chasing that high ever since for a long time, actually. So maybe you'll find it again. But there's the answer. Cheers. Final Entity. Is that like Final Fantasy? Congratulations. Aw, thanks. What are the plans for Kardashev? Can we expect stuff in the near future? Yes. So Kardashev, we actually have... Oh, a little beer foam in my mustache. Gross. We actually have an EP that's like on the cusp of being done. Really, we're going to send it out for mixing and mastering soon. We've got a couple people doing test mixes, as well as, you know, obviously thinking very seriously about going with Maya at SoundLayer in Tennessee. He's done pretty much all of our stuff since we started. So with that, we just are kind of trying to save up the money to send it for mixing and mastering. And, you know, here, have a preview of it right here. We also have a sequel to Iota coming out. It's called, very creatively, Iota 2. We're trying to get at least one of those out by the end of the year. December is quickly approaching, so we'll see how that happens. And we want to do a limited run of physicals, just like 50 of them, one and done. That's it. Never print them again, just because it's kind of a hassle. But yes, quite a few things, hopefully coming out by the end of the year, if not very early next year. Slam Boy, what's up? Did you ever get a moment where you thought, I can't seem to scream right, why am I bothering? I remember seeing this one in the comments initially. I remember this question. How did you overcome that? I'm on the verge of just giving up. I know what to do, but I can't seem to apply it. Okay, so I have never, just to be transparent, I've never had that feeling with vocals, but I have had that feeling with other things. Sometimes I get that feeling, like, let's just be transparent with each other. Sometimes I get that feeling with this channel. I'm just so busy and like drowning, and I'll think to myself, like, do I even have time to be doing this? And then what I remember, and I think what you can remember too, is that this is going to sound bad, but I don't remember who initially said it, but it doesn't take talent to practice. You don't have to be good to get started. I mean, when I started my vocals, they were so bad, dude. Like, they were so bad. And I just kept at it. And I mean, with this channel, in the majority of my videos, like, what the hell is with the lights? It looks like I'm swimming in like a washed out glop. And the microphone, I can't get it to stop crackling. But there's virtue in just trying. There's virtue in just doing. You don't have to be talented to practice. And if you're really having like that much trouble, which is okay, as they said in Adventure Time, I can't remember the quote, so I'm not going to quote it. But there's an episode of Adventure Time that kind of talks about being bad at something before you can be good at something. If you're really having that much trouble, realize that it's not a reflection of you. It's just a reflection of the fact that you might have an extra hurdle other people don't have. And there are people out there that can help you. I do the vocal lesson thing. There are other people out there that do vocal lessons. So definitely don't give up. You'd be doing it yourself an injustice if you gave up. Keep at it. Practice. Continue watching YouTube videos. And if you have the time and if you can, get in with a vocal coach who can help you out. That'd be my suggestion. But more than anything, do not give up, because I'm sure you've got it in you. Epic drum line. I was like, what? The text is kind of small. Please do Impusa Queen of the Damned by Infinite Annihilator. I would love to do more Infinite Annihilator. It's all based on the votes these days. And what is your favorite song vocal-wise, all-time, metal or non-metal? All right. Here we go. It's very hard to say. It's very hard to say what my favorite song is vocal-wise of all time, just because there's so much. But there is a video. I'll link it below. It's a choir singing Poor Wayfaring Stranger by Peter Holland and a group of singers. I think that's beautiful. There's also a guy who I've been listening to his version of Walking on the Air recently. Let me see if I can find it. I'll look real quick. Real quick. Gareth Malone. I don't know anything about him, but I heard a version of Walking in the Air, this choir, and it's amazing. So I think like clean singing in those respects, I think are amazing. Also, there's a lot of really good singing that gets untapped in Bollywood music. Like the amount of control that you hear in like that type of singing in Bollywood is unreal. I'll link some of my favorite Bollywood songs below as well. Dev Das, any song from Dev Das is unreal. Really good. And then when it comes to metal, Accursed by Veil of Nath or Panath, I think is like that song is a roller coaster of just fun vocals. Also, I really like really all of the vocals that Infinite Annihilator does. So yeah, I mean, I don't have like one specific favorite, but really I like most vocal styles that are out there, and I think the whole there's so much fun stuff to find. Hopefully that answered the question for you. Sorry it was a bit scattered, but there you go.